Where's Tim? Is Tim still there? Tim, how are the omelets? Good?
Wonderful.
Give Tim a huge round of applause.
Make about an hour.
Well, hopefully an hour and a half, since we've got 12 to 1:30. Well, thank you, Tim. I don't think we would have as great of attendance as we did if it wasn't for you, so we appreciate you, as always. So thank you guys for coming out today. We're gonna be talking about our book, Exactly What to Say by Phil Jones. The impetus for this class, we've honestly heard a lot about this book over the last year, whether agents in the office who brought it up, David Radney a couple weeks ago who taught a class here mentioned it. And so when Natalie and I were talking, we said we got to really do something around this book. So if today goes well, which we hope it will, we'd love to bring this back again in January because we'll get into some of the magic words. There are 31 of them, so there will most likely not be time to get through each one of them today. But we will continue forward with this as we get into January. But before we continue, obviously everyone is here for a reason. So what are some of the things that you want to make sure you get out of today's class? You know, as you're coming here, what are some things you want to make sure that you walk away with when today's session ends?
Tie downs.
Tie downs, okay. What else?
You guys really think about it. If your communication style changes, what gets better in your life? So just think about those areas. Where are the points in your business or in your life that you feel like better communication would actually make a difference?
Redirecting.
Okay, good. So handling objections, maybe redirection, good. Love that.
I don't know the word, but subject matter, like specifically for like sellers, like what to say to get people, to find people who are gonna sell, what to say to people who may be buying, right? Like specifically. No, I'm trying to figure out, like the word, I can't really figure out like the word, I guess something.
Yeah, how do you have people that take action? I guess that's kind of what you're looking at. Yeah,
Specific.
good. What else?
I think for me, it's stepping out of the box. Like if someone says, you know, you ask a question like, oh no, that doesn't work for me, or I'm not selling right now. Okay, thanks. Bye. You know, to be able to get the conversation going and say more stuff.
Mhm. Good.
Not being a pushy salesperson.
Yep. Yep.
All right.
Continuing the conversation.
Anything else?
Confidence.
Confidence, good. I love that. Love that. Anyone else? Good. I mean, these are a lot of good things. So we're definitely going to make sure we cover a lot of these over the next hour and a half. You know, one of the reasons we wanted to also bring this to all of you guys is because when you think about the market this year, would you agree that next year is probably going to be a similar market to the one we had this year? Maybe a little bit better, but probably pretty similar. Would you guys agree with that? So right now we're in a very skill-based market. So in order to succeed in a skill-based market, you need to know what to say, how to say it, and ultimately having that confidence to be able to redirect conversations or to be able to ask the right questions. So one of the first things that this book really does a good job. And before I start, how many people have read this book or listened to this book on Audible? Just by show of hands. Okay, good. So some of you have, some of you haven't. That's fine. This is going to really cover a lot of different things. One of the things that happens or that he talks about in the first chapter or the first few pages is about who is in control of a conversation. So if I were to ask you that, who's the person that's in control of a conversation?
The person who asked the last question. It's
Yeah.
any given conversation, the person in control.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Would you? I would agree.
Tim, why do you ask?
For a specific reason now, I mean, you could give me the response, it'd be greatly appreciated, so let me ask you this way. What is the top attribute you're looking in the agent that you're going to hire to sell your home?
These are good. You win, Tim, you win. The question you
Yeah.
did not your description.
Why is that important to you, Tim?
The same reason it would be important to you, Matt, because I think as a professional in the industry, it's something that you're looking for, isn't it?
Yes, help me understand why that would be something you would be looking for.
well, before I said Keller Williams Prosperity Realty, we're gonna put you home in front of more people than anyone else, and I think that's the type of service you're looking for, is it not?
There you go. So that's just kind of a little back and forth right there, but it just comes back to making sure you're the one that's asking questions, because the person who's asking questions is the one that's in control of the conversation. So I just want you guys to think about that for a second, because I think this is one of the most important things in this book. When you guys are having conversations with others, whether you're on an appointment, whether you're on the phone, are you the one doing most of the talking, or are you the one doing most of the listening? I just want you to think about that, because that is something that's very important, is make sure that you're a very active and that you're someone that's not just what I call word vomiting. And I think that happens. I think we've all been guilty of that, where I was talking to Pete before, you have to be comfortable with silence. You have to be comfortable sometimes not taking someone's silence as, okay, I got to jump in and keep talking, because ultimately maybe you haven't given that person enough time to even digest what you're saying or to come with a response. So I just want you guys to really think about that as you go forward with different conversations with buyers, with sellers, with friends, with family. Make sure that you're listening and making sure that you're the one that's asking questions and not the one that's always doing all the talking. Because if you are, then you're going to be not the one in control of the conversation.
Well, and I think that's a good point too, is like a lot of times we look at stuff like this is like, how are we gonna sell more real estate, or how are we gonna be better real estate salespeople? But like, these are skills that can make you a better parent, a better spouse, a better friend, because it is like you're not, and also you're not just asking a question for the question's sake. You're asking a question to find out more information, and when you find out more information, you can serve that client better. You can show your family member that you're paying attention to what they want. You can surprise them on a birthday with something that they said that they wanted because you were actually listening, and it can make a big difference in your life overall.
And you're getting clarity with questions, because a lot of times we think we know what someone wants and we think we know what's most important to them. And so we talk based on what we think they want to know versus actually asking the questions and learning, okay, this is really what's important to them. So over the course of the next, hour and 20 minutes, we are going to do some role play a little bit too, nothing like super stressful or anything like that for those who don't like role play. I just want to, preface that it's not going to be like super hardcore, but just kind of getting used to using some of these magic words in sentences. So that way, when you do go out into everyday life, you're getting the habit of using them. One of the things that Natalie and I are going to start doing as well is each month having one of the magic words where we're really focusing on it and really making sure we're introducing that into our vocabulary. Because like I said, there are 31. So I don't expect people for you guys to leave today and be like, okay, I'm going to master every single one. Focus on one of them, master it, and then move on to the next one. So with that said, I know how many people said they read or listened to the book? We had like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So what I wanted to do first and foremost to kind of identify which ones we want to start with from a topic perspective. And also, Natalie, thank you for making these flashcards last night. I think
Can you guys see them?
Yeah, that's
Try
good.
to find the biggest index cards I could.
Karen can't do it.
You can.
Not really.
So for those who have read or listened to the book, which ones over there are ones you've actually used out in the field or in your everyday life?
Or ones that have made you think, wow, I never thought to say it that way, or, oh, okay, that's an option for me to use. Anything on here?
Oh, what happens next?
Mhm.
Why that one cut?
That's the one I can read.
What made you choose that one?
Is that a question?
That's
I mean, I think
definitely-
everything, they always wanna know what happens
Yeah.
next. I mean,
Especially-
everybody wants to be prepared of what the next step is along the process, because that's the fear.
Or yes.
Our
Oh, go ahead.
I was saying these are our questions that we would be posing.
Or it could be statements that we're making as well. So I think specifically in the book, there were a couple ways that they utilized this one. One of the ways is sometimes at the end of an appointment or at the end of a conversation with someone, a lot of times people don't go to close. They just, it's kind of like that awkward, okay, well, what happens next? And so what the author is saying is that you can tell them what happens next. So what happens next is you're gonna, sign the listing paperwork. I'm gonna have the photographer come by tomorrow at 2 p.m. and then this. So you're basically going through your list of all the things that you're doing, and you're pretty much telling them this is what's happening next. So that's one way to approach it.
Which I agree, Pat, because I think it's all about anticipating the other person's needs. So if you already feel like you just addressed a lot of their objections, being able to say, okay, I'm not going to wait until they respond and say, okay, well, I'm ready to move forward. Let me just assume,
Yeah.
and let me just say, let's focus on what comes next. And that way, again, it is taking ownership of that conversation. And oftentimes people are looking for the direction. They're looking to the professional to lead instead of just you waiting and assuming. You're not their assistant, you're their guidance. And so I love that one as well. Any others on here that stand out to you guys? I can read some of them aloud in case I know Karen can't see. What is that? I'm not reading like.
Maybe not like.
13.
13? Oh, sure. When would be a good time?
That's hard.
I feel like I use you have 3 options a lot.
In what setting, Matt?
When really trying to drive a point home and like talking about their options, right? Whether they're talking about a listing strategy or an offer, a multiple offer situation, an issue.
Yeah, I actually use that a lot more than I realized too, now that you say that, yeah. And it may not always be 3, but you're kind of just like,
Narrow it down.
here's what your options are. And it is usually 3, actually.
Can you give an example of where you use that?
Yeah, well, so, okay, well, say the seller doesn't wanna give termite treatment. Right, and you can say, okay, well, we really have 3 options here, right? We can go to them and we can say, no, we're not gonna do the treatment, and we know that we potentially run the risk of them canceling the deal. You could just outright cancel the deal and not sell at all. Or you could say maybe like, we could push it back on them and tell them that they would be responsible to do it. Or we could maybe split the cost of what it would take to get the termite, or maybe offer some other kind of solution.
And why does that work for you, Keith, when you do that? What do you notice is effective? about
It takes away the combativeness. It takes away the you against them, because that's what, I saw on Instagram today. It was like your seller hates you until the house is sold. And that's like, it's funny because it's like you do sometimes feel, right? Like you're like, oh, it's not like, if you're not careful, you can sometimes have the seller starting to wonder like, okay, are you working for me or are you working for the buyer? Or like what, like now I have to argue with my own seller's agent. But what you're really doing is giving them your advice based on your experience. And when you give them 3 options, they're in control. And the perceived control, none of us are really in control,
It
right?
makes you seem professional.
And it makes you seem professional, for sure. You know what it is, you're saying these are. In my experience, this is what your options are based on, and you're not like creating anything crazy, you're really just laying out what actual options are.
Well said, well said. Any other ones that stand out here for anyone?
Would it help if,
Would it help if-
yeah, it's on one.
Would it help if we made these cards bigger so Karen could read them?
For 8.
How would you feel?
Oh. Yeah,
Oh, no, this is a different one.
I know. Maybe I need to go to the doctor, get my eyes checked.
Sorry, good.
It looks similar, it's for the words.
Matt, I know that there have been a few that you tested out. Which ones were your top ones?
Yeah, so I like most people. Most people's a good one because others want to be like most people. So when you're using the phrase most people, then if they're not gonna do something, then they're like, okay, well, maybe they're not like most people. So, that one is a good one. I also like the good news is, if you're talking with someone who, number 22, if you're talking to someone who typically is, maybe more pessimistic or more negative, rather than just kind of like commiserating and kind of feeding into the negativity, being like, oh, well, the good news is, whatever, again, whatever the situation is, if you're, looking at something from a different perspective, people usually appreciate that.
I have a good example for that one.
Good.
So like if you put a house on the market and the seller gets an offer that's, lower than what they would want, right? And you commiserate with them. Yeah, I know, I can't believe they came in so low, blah, blah, blah. The good news is we have an offer. So now we have the ability to be able to counter. So now you're taking a negative and turning it into a positive and trying to put a good spin on it.
On the right side.
On the bright side, yeah.
Is normal on there? No, it's normal, or the word normal isn't really part of this, right? Because that's a good one too.
How do you use it? Is there
So-
like a similar one?
So to Matt, with most people, right, it's that same kind of idea, right, where people want to feel like most people, where they, or like. Like, people only buy and sell real estate a few times in their life, so they don't really know what's normal or not. So when you say something, again, going back to the termite treatment, and you say, oh, it's normal for the seller to do this, or like, it's, you know, I do use it a lot, like how people feel, like it's normal to feel this way. We've been on the market and we haven't gotten offers. It's normal to feel that way. And to Tim's point, what we talked about earlier, then you bring the numbers into it and you say, but you know, it's normal based on what we're seeing in the market, right? Because we're seeing an average of 14 days on the market before offers or things. Like, I think that's it, like most people, normal.
There's one that's also similar. It was the one that says, I bet you're a bit like me. I know we talked about this one, Matt.
Yeah.
When you say that, so I know the example we talked about was moving into the holidays, you might be able to say, I bet you're a bit like me. It gets very busy during the holiday season, families involved, and you want that to be your top priority. I sell your home. However, and then most people, if they do sell during winter, they can give them some of the pros. So I do think they are connected, but just relating with them in that personal regard could be another way that's effective.
In one way, just going back for the most people one, so specifically in the book, a couple of the examples that they gave is, most people who list with me sell over their asking price. Most people find that the first offer they received is typically the best one. Most people in your circumstances would ensure their home is presented at its best if they wanted to reach for the highest possible price. What most people would do with inspection concerns is make a contingency for the buyer. Most people want to make a bunch of last minute repairs to their home, but that's not always necessary. So, like, for example, the last one you could have an objection, oh, I want my house to be, you know, fully ready and good to go before it's listed. You say, well, most people want to make a bunch of last minute repairs to their home, but that's not always necessary. So to kind of expedite that process, create urgency.
You know, it's so funny, the more and especially last time when I was writing these for you guys, I felt like I was studying for an exam. The more that I look at all these phrases, I see there's a commonality among them. Where it reminds me of what I read in Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He talks about thinking in terms of the other person's interest. So if you notice, and I think, who was it that said, Maria, you said continuing the conversation. I never, when I speak to someone, especially when I don't really know them and I'm trying to get information, if I find the conversation stops, I'm thinking less of myself and I'm more just trying to put myself in their shoes. Okay, what's something that could be a concern? If they don't know me, what's something that might prevent them from giving me information, right? And all of these questions are designed to really think and learn more information about that. So one of my favorites is this one, and you guys heard Matt use that when he was speaking with Tim. He purposely did that.
I did.
He was using examples when he was playing that question game with Tim.
But I do love that. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So help me understand, when I read that in the book, it was saying it's an alternative to tell me more about this. And the explanation was when you say tell me, it's a little bit more instructional and a little bit more commanding. And when I read that, I was thinking, I'm not a commanding person yet. I'm using a word that can be perceived as commanding. So now that I just thought, it's just such a tiny change, help me understand. You now are a lot more approachable. So if there is something that they maybe didn't want to share with you, it's like, oh, yeah, I'll help you understand. I'm helping you. I'm not telling you because you asked. So again, it's just how do you really connect with them and get more information using words, and it's such a tiniest word change that makes them feel more comfortable and helps them, like Pete said, helps them feel in control. So I just think it's really great, the commonality.
Or if you're going on an appointment with like a for sale by owner, like help me understand the benefits of selling without an agent. So, you know, to Kyle's question of redirecting, sometimes people, I feel like the help me understand question is a great way to redirect a conversation. Because if someone's coming at you, like, you know, with very, you know, if they're very certain and it feels like they're kind of like, hey, this is what my opinion is, this, and I'm not going to budge. The help me understand kind of gets clarity around, okay, well, like, where are your facts based out of? Like, where are you, you know, where's your perspective coming from? So that way you can then absorb that and be like, you know, well, have you considered, you know, and try to pivot that conversation. But I feel like the help me understand, or, you know, why is that important to you, are really great questions to help redirect the conversation. And so I would definitely use those in your back pocket for sure.
There was this one, when you said the word certain, that made me think.
No, yes, that was the one I was
How
thinking.
certain are you?
Yeah.
And I know this is, honestly speaking, this is a style of personality that me and Matt do not always like to communicate with. It's a person who says, okay, I know it all, even when they don't, and they're speaking based on facts and they're not budging from that. But this is a great question when you say, okay, well, how certain are you that that realtor will get the most exposure for your house? And I know the book goes through such a great list of questions where, okay, if they seem like they want to be the person in control, ask them that. So that way they get to fact check you and they get to say, oh, this is where I get my information. I am certain. Or when they hear you say, how certain are you that blah, 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 blah. Now they're thinking, well, I assumed this, but now it might put some doubt in their mind. Because when you use that word certain, it now gets them to say, well, I'm not that certain. So it's just that simple word choice. So just things to consider when you're up against someone who just has their heels locked into the ground and they just don't want to budge. How certain are you if this will happen is a really great one to use. Any other ones on here that, and you guys had some time to look at this, whether you've read the book or not, especially if you haven't read the book, seeing this.
Which ones are you curious about? Yeah.
Which ones are you curious about or surprised or up there, or it might be a rephrase that you're like, oh, that's an interesting one. Any of them stand out to anyone, particularly people who haven't read the book? 20? Don't worry.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
It means you're right there. The only one you're blocking. Yeah, that's a good one.
Thanks, Kyle.
Does anyone use that in their conversations now, if they don't worry to their clients?
No, I feel it's patronizing.
I think it depends on how you use it.
Give us the examples.
Sure, so, you know, there's a million things that are gonna go on and drive your sales, so listen, don't worry about your CCO, don't worry about your fire inspection, don't worry about the home inspection, don't worry about any of that, that's what I'm here for. So that's positive that you would say, on one side it sounded patronizing, on the other side, you've now relieved them, released all that, you know, responsibility off of them.
I would also say the way that you, I love that, Ron. I think the other way you could use that, like I'll give an example in what Natalie and I do, and I've also related to what, you know, when you're listing a property. We get all the time people that say, look, I'm nervous about joining Keller Williams because it's so hard transitioning, it's so hard, you know, getting set up, it's so hard going, you know, and making a change. If they're coming from another brokerage. But if you say, oh, don't worry, we have a whole onboarding team, you know, Christina, there's Christina right there. You know, she'll meet with you upon coming on board, she'll get your website set up, she gets your mobile app set up, you know, she'll meet with you a few times over your first few weeks to get you acclimated and all of that. So don't worry about the transition. We've helped, you know, numerous people come in and it's been, you know, an awesome transition. So just kind of lessening their apprehension, or someone who might be looking to list their property might be like, oh, don't worry about, you know, I'll take care of getting, you know, the photography is going to be ready, we'll help you stage the property, we'll help you do like kind of your punch list of all the things you're doing. So, you know, because it is a high stress situation, you know, when someone's listing property, there could be a lot of emotion attached to it as well, depending on how long they've lived there. So I feel like the don't worry, it could come across as patronizing, but if you present it in a way where it's more like, okay, I know this is a stressful time, but don't worry about all of these things because we have a whole, you know, team of people, or I'm the one that's helping organize and set this up. So I think it's just how it's presented.
Yeah,
Be happy, exactly.
So I guess it's gotta be more like reassuring when you use it.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, that's the way I use it more as a way of just reassuring someone, like, don't stress, like, don't worry, you know, and having more of a calming influence as opposed to like, oh, well, don't worry about that, you shouldn't be worrying about that. Like, don't, yeah, very two different ways of presenting it. So if you say it more like, oh, you shouldn't be worried about that, like, how can you be worried?
Then it's not
Oh,
about it.
Yeah.
I love what Matt just said. Matt, can you repeat
Yeah, can you repeat that louder?
I said, especially if it's something that you're confident about, right?
Yeah.
Like if, like you could always all imagine like being on the phone with the salesperson and like they're like, oh, what about the water in the backyard? Oh, don't worry about that, right? It's like, I'm worried about that. Well, to your point, it's like, if I've done a million CO inspections and I know that I can do them flawlessly for my seller, right? Like, oh, that's something you do not have to worry about.
Yeah.
Because I'm confident because I've done it a million times.
And you can also leverage your experience too. You
Yeah.
can use an example of why they shouldn't worry about it, because maybe you say, oh, I had a similar transaction or I had a similar situation.
I sold a house on the same block. And did not have
Yes.
that, yeah.
You know, so I think always leveraging your experience and leveraging past, and then if you don't have experience, tap into, if there's a wealth of experience here, you know, if you did encounter and you didn't know how to respond, reach out to Kieran, you know, reach out to someone who has done that before and who can answer those questions. But yeah, I think coming at it from just, you know, lessening anxiety and more like that, saying don't worry, it's different than coming at it from, oh, you shouldn't worry about that, like, because that does come across as, you know, to not, well, I am worried about it. So it's just how you use the word.
And if you're thinking about, well, which part of my business can I be confident in? This is where you sit down and you look at the value proposition for your business. Okay, what is it that I can offer them that I can say confidently, oh, you don't have to worry about that. This is actually what we can supply as a larger network. We can expose your property to more people. That's not something I would be concerned about. That's actually one of my greatest strengths. But in order to do that, know what you and your business represent. What is your value proposition as a realtor and as a person? What are your character traits where maybe you're one of the hardest working people that you know, you pride yourself in that, right? So make sure you know that before you walk into it. And if you do actually, again, back to confidence, you get more confidence when you know who you are and you know what you represent. But it does take time to sit down and go through them. And I know Pete and Tim, in our profitability committee meetings, we've talked a lot about value proposition. So just things to consider, especially when you go into 2024. Now is the time to ask, okay, was I a realtor that just represented business? Well, how do I maybe make it more specific next year? I know Kathy Van Dyne, she does a really great job of really having a value proposition, where she markets herself as someone who really cares about dogs, and a lot of her business is to support a lot of those shelters. It's like one of her biggest passions and is all over her social media. So people are attracted to work with her because she aligns with herself with things that are important to her. So now is a good time to ask, okay, great, if my business grows, what happens? What other organizations benefit? Who else in my life benefit? Another realtor group that I saw, they aligned with themselves with counting the number of families they've helped get new homes. That's their brand. They have little houses all that track how many families did we help this year. It's little houses. It's not just tallies and not just dollar signs. We didn't just get more commissions. These are the families that we've helped. And you guys are part of it. You see what happens when you help a family find that home after a long time of struggling, or maybe selling a property that was with a deceased family member that was stressing them out. You see that lives get changed when real estate moves. So really looking at your value proposition, if that's something that tugs at your heartstrings, really look at that and make sure your tracking systems reflect what's most important to you. So just
I feel like I've used not to worry rather than don't worry a lot. Not to worry.
like what's an example of something that's like,
Well, I called a couple of FSBOs a couple of days ago, and there was a lot of walls I had to experience. And so, like, for example, when I was talking to somebody, he asked, I didn't introduce myself as a realtor to begin with. And he asked, are you a realtor? And I said, yes. He's like, we're not interested in selling with a realtor. And I said, well, not to worry. I'm here just gathering information on the property. Then potentially show it to, or not show it, but if someone was looking for something like this in specific, I could present the buyer and kind of like redirect it. I mean, my first couple of calls were rocky, so.
The first couple are always gonna be rocky,
Yeah.
but the fact you pick up the phone, that's good.
Yeah.
That's the important thing.
and the fact that you knew the conversation didn't end there and you're testing out, okay, let me see if this changes the tone of the conversation. Did it continue the conversation or did it still end there?
It did, but it wasn't in my favor.
Well, so let's walk through that a little bit. So you had the call. So talk through what the conversation was like, because why don't we as a group kind of work through what type of responses could we give, so that way when you're gonna have more of those, look, you're gonna call people that are gonna people are gonna hang up, there's people that are gonna, you know, they're gonna say that's the thing, I don't want to work with a realtor. So walk through the conversation and maybe let's all work together and see how we could work through that conversation.
I think my biggest thing was, it's like I told you, I never asked why he didn't want to work with a realtor. It like skipped my mind. And it was like probably like arguably the most important question to ask, especially figuring out, you know, or especially trying to get that listing, is why don't they want to work with you? And I never asked it.
Well, and that's where that helped me understand, but help me understand why you don't want to work with a realtor.
Yeah.
And see if they say something back to that. You know, try to get clarity there, because then you can always, you know, one of the other ones on there, how would you feel if I could get your home in front of 400 agents in our network that could get us sold for top dollar? You know,
That's something I forgot to mention.
well, no, but and that's, look, it's good that you have this conversation, but that like those types of dialogues can help, you know, again, one, you're trying to learn, okay, why don't they want to work with a realtor? Like, did they have a bad experience? Was there something that like was awful? They would try to get an understanding of what happened and then try to redirect, your word, redirect that into a different direction. Who else? I know you, Matt, you've called for sale by owners a
I was
bunch,
just
right?
thinking,
Like, how would you have handled that situation? Or Pete, I know you've done that a lot as well.
I was just thinking, cause you were talking about, I bet you're a bit like me.
Yes.
I was thinking about how I could weave into this.
Yep.
And like, you wanna come not from like super salesy from a FSBO perspective, but you could say something like, I bet you're a bit like me, wanna do everything yourself, or like do things yourself. But how much longer do you plan on giving it before you decide to hire a professional? So it's like, I'm starting to like,
Say that one again, 'cause I think that's good.
yeah, I bet you're a bit like me and like to do things yourself, or however you wanna word that. But how much longer do you plan on giving it a try before you hire a professional?
Love that.
I'll use that, how would you feel, what number is that?
8.
Number 8, yeah. Right back at him, how would you feel if I actually had the buyer that bought your home? Shut your mouth after that. Just let it sit there. For as
What's
much
he gonna say, like, oh, I'm
possible.
miserable, like?
Yeah, I feel terrible.
Yeah.
Try not.
Well, that's the power of these questions, is
Yeah.
a lot of times it's like, okay, well, they almost have to agree with you, because otherwise they're, like, the way you phrase the question, they can be an idiot not to
Yeah.
agree with what you're saying. It's because exactly what you just said, the way you phrase it is perfect. How's that person gonna respond?
I think when it comes to like a lot of just something to like think about, and it came to me and you were talking about the don't worry, right? And the two ways don't worry can sound condescending or can sound normal, or not normal, but like welcoming, I guess. Is it really comes down to like there's 3 components to overcome objections, right? It's you have to
3 options.
you have 3 options, right? Where you isolate, you validate, and then you overcome, right? So you have to figure out what, like, you can't tell somebody to not worry about something if you don't know what they're worrying about, right? So it starts with identifying or isolating what the objection is. And then to your point of like someone moving over, you can use something like most people, you're validating that. So someone said, well, tell me what would keep you from moving over to KW today? Well, I have to transfer my license, I don't want to lose any deals and blah, blah, blah. Okay, I understand that. And most people are concerned about that. But don't worry, we have a proven system and process that will actually make it a very easy transition for you and you won't lose a dime. Would that work for you? Great. So what happens next is, and those are like all ways that you're using all these words to kind of like keep it together. But if you don't, like, as far as the FSBO concern goes, if you don't know what their objection to using a realtor is, there's no way you can overcome that objection, right? You can't overcome an objection that you don't know what it is. Because what happens then is you're saying, well, listen, I know you don't want to pay an agent, and you're going on about how they're gonna lose money or whatever, and you're talking about money, but their issue might be they have a sick child in the house that they don't want people traipsing through their house. So they're trying to do it that way. So now you're over here trying to overcome this objection, which doesn't even exist, instead of focusing on what the actual concern is. And that's where it like kind of, I think it's important to remember too.
Another one that comes to mind is how certain are you? So one of the responses you get are about, well, I just don't want to pay out a commission. Because that's a very common response. Then we can always say, like, how certain are you that not paying a commission is the best way to save money or make the most money from the sale of your house? And if that's their main concern, you can show them houses that were sold through a realtor and houses that were sold. And I know you talk about this all the time when you sell a house for sale by owner versus through a realtor. You can actually run reports and show how much more money you can make if you use a professional. So if that's their concern. Now, again, it's you get that objection, you figure out, okay, which of these will help me dig deeper into it. But it can be different, and you can't assume that we know what it is. So I love how you use multiple in one line.
Yeah, and one thing I always want to throw out there too, because I think some people hear me talk and they're like, oh my gosh, like he's a natural, like he knows how to talk, and I'm not like tooting my own horn. And Tim, I think people
tell him all the time.
Well, no, but seriously, and I think like Tim, I think people look at people like Tim and us who kind of like can just like spout these things off, and they're like, oh my gosh, like I wish I could do that, but you can do that. It's just a matter of being intentional about learning these words and then incorporating them, like you said. So does he say in the book to do that like once a week, to pick these things out and use them once a week?
I don't know that he did.
Because I did that too, actually. That's
that's
something I would like
yeah.
keep it on my desk and look at. But yeah, when it comes to FSBOs too, what were we just talking about? Oh, well, don't, like, when he said, like, I don't wanna work with an agent, or I'm not hiring, you say, well, don't worry, I don't take every listing. But what most, you know, and then you can kind of go on from there, like, there's just so many different ways you can use this. But to kind of like, kind of almost reverse sell it and make them say, you know, well, don't worry, I don't actually take every listing. What I found is, I don't know. What do you understand about using a real estate agent? And then just let them talk. Because when they're talking, they're gonna give you
You're
clues.
learning.
They're gonna give you little things that you can focus on, and you might not get it then, you might not get the appointment right then, but then if you're taking notes. Because they were talking the whole time, you can take notes, then when you call them back next week and say, hey, how'd it go? Did the home sell? No, well, listen, I remember you were worried about this, whatever, and you can kind of now focus on new things.
And a lot of these questions and a lot of these magic words ultimately help tie back to one of my favorite bold laws, which is logic makes you think, emotion makes you act. So you're really trying to find what's important to the person that you're talking to. So that way you're, helping them think logically, but ultimately it's gonna be emotion that's gonna ultimately make them make the decision. So a lot of these questions, a lot of these statements, and a lot of these conversations are really about getting at the heart of, A, making things logically, but B, getting them to make a decision based on emotion. What about the first one? Now, because I feel like we kind of overlooked, I think you talked about that one yesterday, about how you use that a lot. So do you want to talk, I'm not sure if it's for you, but.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of testing things that I learned from books. If you guys don't know that about me, now you know. So when I opened that book first and I saw this, I was like, I would never say that. I'm not sure if it's for you, but why would I tell them if it's not for you? However, I know that word but, and if you guys took bold, you remember this, we even had a bracelet where you're not supposed to use the word but throughout the course of bold, and you had to like tap your bracelet if you heard someone else saying it. And does anyone remember the reason why?
It erases what you just said.
Exactly. And so he was explaining in the book that you can use it to your advantage. And so when you say, I'm not sure if it's for you, but you're basically now erasing the part where you said that, and now they're really listening to the second half of that sentence. And whenever you tell people that, and from when I practice it, I found that I would say, oh, there's a program that I think would be interesting. I'm not sure if it's for you, but I can send you more information if you like. You're almost always just like, oh, okay, I'll send me more information. It's like they don't like being told, don't tell me it's not for me.
Well, and and to that point, what's the one reason why most people don't want to either make calls or door knock or do some of the activities? What's the one? Rejection. Exactly, so this.
Everybody knew that answer.
Yeah. I know, it's like, that came as a resounding, yes. The reason this one is so important is because this basically eliminates the rejection aspect, because you're already saying, I'm not sure if it's for you, but. So if you were working with a buyer or something, you're gonna send them a property, again, it's eliminating that fear of that, no, like I'm not sure if it's for you, but if they do say, no, okay, that's fine, you said it might not be for you, and that's okay. So that magic word or that magic statement allows you to eliminate that kind of fear of rejection that some of you may feel when you're going into certain calls or certain situations. So, using the, I'm not sure if it's for you, but I feel like that's one of the first one. I think that's why they have it as number one in the book, because it's I don't think they're discriminating based on order, but I think that's why he did it first, is because a lot of people's their biggest fear is that rejection, and this is the one that I think combats that rejection the most.
You can tag it with most people.
Exactly. So it all starts to it all starts to weave together.
Does anyone use this one, open-minded? Is that a word that anyone here uses frequently? And the examples he wrote here, and I just put them in case you guys were curious how he uses it. How open-minded would you be to ... Or would you be open-minded to ... Or how open-minded are you to ... Does anyone use that regularly?
I'm sorry, and I can use a couple examples of what they have in the book too, page 22. It's how open-minded would you be to working with an experienced local agent to help you sell your home? Would you be open-minded to reducing your asking price? How open-minded are you to looking at something that could be perfect, but a little over your budget? Would you be open-minded to considering some alternative neighborhoods? And how open-minded are you to working with a trusted local lender to get this approved? There's a couple more too, but those are some examples of how you could use that. Does anyone use that? I think
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's disarming. It's like, who wants to say they're not open-minded to something, it just makes sense.
And it's not a commitment, it's just saying if you're open-minded. So that was one I also really liked.
So before we go into a couple, because there's a couple more that we haven't gone through. What are some objections you guys are facing out there? So, because I think now could be a good kind of workshop that we could, kind of like we did for the one that Kyle provided. Like, what are some of the things that you guys are having conversations around? And maybe you're facing some objections that we could work through how we would navigate those conversations better.
After the holidays.
Okay. So how would you guys, cause I've a thought of how I would respond to that. But what are?
You said one today, right? What was it? It was,
I bet you're a bit like me,
I bet you're a bit like me, yeah.
because I mean, if you're busy over the holidays too, which you have a very fun family, so I know you're busy on the holidays. So if you tell them I bet you're a bit like me and you just relate to things that are naturally true about your life. It gets you guys on the same page, which is the whole point of pretty much everything here. You know it's working, and this is a good test. You know it's working if the person is moving closer to you, where they feel like they can talk to you, they feel like their wall is down, and that is one of the phrases I feel like I would never use. And part of it is because I don't speak like that. I don't use the word a bit at all, but I do like the fact that it has where it's like, oh, I'm relating myself to the other person. So test it out. And I only know that because I take one and we're gonna do it a month to see how well we can use it as much as possible within a 1 month time period. And then we'll come back to you guys and tell you what we thought and what we experienced. But even if you give it a week, every conversation you have, let me see how I can throw it in there. You might find that there's a different reaction than you might have expected. You might think, oh, that's not something I would ever say. Oh, but wow, they responded to it really well. And that's the best way you can really test out words that are not natural to your
Well,
repertoire.
Yeah, and I would say in response, like when you initially said, I want to wait till after the holidays. Or I want to wait till spring. Okay, do you want to be, do you want to list when everyone else is listing? Or do you want to be one of the few listings that's on the market right now? And the differences in terms of why that would be important.
If I could add something to
Yeah.
that too, is I think, again, it starts with isolating the objection. Why?
Yes.
What was I just gonna say? I mean, I would say like what, but help me, so Matt, you wanna wait until after the holidays? So
Yeah.
what's important about waiting until after the holidays?
I just got a lot going on, we have Christmas coming up, New Year's is big in my family, and I'm just not ready to pull the trigger just yet.
Okay, so you got holidays coming up, New Year's Eve is.
Yeah, just a hectic time of year.
So can you help me understand how this could impact your holidays and how you would wanna put it off because of that?
Yeah, I mean, just if I let's say I listed it now, I'd have to have people come through my house, right? And I'd have to start packing, right? And I feel like I'm unpacking when I'm decorating for Christmas, and it's I'm never home.
Gotcha. Yeah, most people feel that way when it comes to selling around the holidays. But let me ask you, Matt, how would you feel if we could sell your home for more money today? And we were actually able to limit some of those inconveniences so you could still do the things that you wanted to do. Is that something you would want to learn more about?
Yeah, of course I want to, I would love to get the best possible deal for my house. And yeah, I mean.
Yeah, how would it feel if we didn't list it now and we actually saw that you sold for significantly less in the spring when everybody else was going on the market?
That'd be really unfortunate.
Yeah. So let's do this. Why don't we get together on Friday? Who's 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock better?
And talk about some of those probably.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So what did you
That's
guys,
the last question.
so what did you guys see in that conversation? 'Cause I thought that was, that was awesome.
We got the meeting,
He did.
Yeah,
whether we list now or not.
And now Pete's gonna be able to show you, okay, what's the difference between listing now versus what you could get today.
But he already knows his concerns when he goes to that meeting,
Correct,
so he's showing up ready.
Yeah.
correct. Well, exactly. And Pete knows that one of his objections was, oh, aren't there gonna be a lot of people coming into the house? So that's another thing that, Pete said, something more convenient.
Yeah.
So.
I do like that you went through both the positive and the negative, both the dream and the fear, where you asked him, okay, well, how would you feel if it sold for significantly less money? That was really quick how you did it. You did the positive and you're like, oh, just in case, let's talk about the negative in case he's having any doubts. So I like that you did that very proactively.
It's also created urgency.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think this time of year, that's the best way to, if someone's gonna list now, it's gonna be to create that urgency.
Who? Someone said I wouldn't be doing my job if. that's
Oh,
another
Tim is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't tell you this side. Bill uses it a lot, Bill uses it a lot too, and yeah, I mean, so again, it's not like you're like. Necessarily putting fear into them, right? You're just saying, like, as a professional, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't tell you what else could happen.
Well,
So
and
actually fear.
it's also important again to isolate, like to understand and isolate the objection, because you might have said, well, my new job doesn't start until whatever date, so that, because then there's no point really, and like you know that there's really no, it doesn't make sense now, and sometimes it doesn't make sense
Yeah.
now, you know, but I think that's important to know too.
Any other objections you guys were facing? Cause I thought that was that helpful? What else are you guys encountering either on appointments or fears that you might have or objections you think you might get?
Listen, I feel like you and I talked about that. Not to get to the spot, only because we talked about this. Is there any that you've been thinking about that could potentially prevent you from making the number of calls that you do want for 2024?
Nothing that just comes to mind. I'm just taking this all in.
Well, is there anything on here that stood out to you where you really like?
Well, I like, how certain are you and help me understand.
A lot of times people aren't certain.
Yeah.
Right,
It's just in their head.
right.
They come across
They
it,
like say it. Yeah,
but they're not.
I'm actually not that certain.
Yeah.
Like you talked about packing, right, which would assume that your whole house is gonna sell quickly and that you're gonna close. So it's like, well, how certain are you that you're ready to sell now?
That you need to start packing.
Yeah. How certain are you that your house is gonna sell really quick? So let's do the right thing. Why don't I come out, we'll walk through and we can start putting a plan together, so when you are ready.
Are there any other objections? Cause you guys are probably having conversations, you know, for the most part, you know, what are some of the things that people are pushing back on? What are some, you know, cause I think, Matt, the one that you gave, that I think that's probably the most common one right now. It's like, well, why would I list today? Because we have, you know, we have holidays and stuff. I think that's a very prevalent one right now. Is there anything else you guys are facing or ones you're afraid of maybe encountering?
It's not the right time.
Okay.
I feel like that's something you're gonna hear a lot.
Mhm.
These people are just like maybe curious or wanting to do something, but maybe not wanting to take action for, you know, X amount of reason.
And again, it's like, to help me understand why now is not the best time.
Mhm.
You know,
Where am I gonna go?
Yeah, that's also.
Yeah.
So how are you guys handling that one now? Like Pat or Tim or, sorry, I never want to single anyone else. I don't want to name names or like Pete or like, how are you guys facing or handling that objection?
I bet you're like most people and don't want to be homeless. I can relate to that. Yeah.
How else would you guys maybe think of using one of these tools to potentially respond to that? 'Cause that's a good one, Alfred.
Heather, do you have any that? Any people who say that to you about when you're scared to not have a home to move into? Still working through that one.
I will pretty love to take a move with my wife.
Well, how certain are you that you won't have a place to go to?
Yeah.
Could it be possible that we could find you something that would suit your needs?
That's a good time to use most people.
How would you use that?
For most people in your position, it always ends up working out. We get their fine.
What makes you say that? Right, like I'm sure they hear on the video or something like that, oh, now it's not a good time to buy. What makes you say that?
What do you understand about?
Yeah,
What do you understand about the market right now?
how would you feel if I found you something right away?
I think another way to do that is how would you feel if this market didn't change for another 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, cause you were talking about that, Heather, before, you were saying like people are like, oh, I'm waiting for the market to crash, and you're like, how does that work out for you?
How would you feel if it doesn't?
Another one is, would it help if, you can always talk about putting a contingency.
And I think that's also where it comes back to the motivation of the buyer or the person, because if you know that, you know, they're crammed in their house that they're living in right now, then you wanna try to create that picture of, okay, well, like to Pete's point, is this what you want for the next, you know, 1 or 2 years if things don't change?
Well, I'm actually just looking at it right now, so if you say, well, actually, most people, or you could say most of my clients this year have been concerned about that. And the good news is, not one of them have been homeless yet.
Yeah.
What do you understand about home sale contingencies? I think if I could show you a way, I think I don't think that's on here, but that's a really powerful one.
When would be a good time for me to show you how I find houses for my clients?
Are there any other ones up there that we haven't covered that we could dive into?
How would you use, I'm guessing you haven't got around to.
So. Okay, well, does anyone, I mean.
Call me back.
Well, so the way that I think it was used in the book is, I think we've all had times where, you know, you give someone action steps when you're leaving a meeting and you're like, oh, like, you know, oh, I have to talk to my spouse before I make a decision, or I have to, you know, I have to do X, Y, Z for them to happen. And then they say they're gonna do it in the next week and they don't call you back. And so rather than kind of like coming at them and be like, hey, like you must not, like, it's, I'm guessing you haven't gotten around to talking to your spouse yet. And that way it gives kind of a deflection of, okay, yeah, well, I didn't yet, but I'm going to, so that way you're not kind of antagonizing them that they didn't do something, but rather, you know, I'm guessing you just haven't gotten around to blank.
I think I'm gonna use that one. I was telling you, I'm doing DTD2 right now, and I'm seeing a lot of expireds that expired like 3 years ago in my database. And I might use that. Oh, I'm guessing you haven't gotten around to selling your house.
Yeah.
I noticed that last time we spoke was, you know, 2 years ago when your house came off the market.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't gotten around to it yet.
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna use that.
That's a good one to use, and that's a great question.
I didn't see that, huh?
Is it?
14.
Oh.
So what else? Any other ones on there?
I did want to point out the last one. So he just talks about simple swaps. So even if nothing that we talked about today resonates with you guys, he just gives a few examples of some of the simple swaps. So for an open house, if you ask, do you have any questions? Instead of saying that, where people will most likely say no, you ask, what questions do you have for me? And then the other one, are you working with an agent? Switching that to, who is your realtor? And the third one he wrote here was, can I have your email address? Switching that to, what is the best email address at which I can reach you? So just small little ways of phrasing it for your system.
Say the open house one again, because I think that's one that I think a lot of people do kind of backwards. You know, because I think if you can do that one again, 'cause I think that one's one that I think needs to resonate.
So instead of saying, are you working with an agent, saying, who is your realtor?
You're
If
kind
you
of
have
putting them
any
on the spot.
paperwork for you to have them sign in, maybe rephrasing it on the paperwork, so that way they do have to put a name of a realtor that they're working with.
Don't remember their name, but I agree with that.
I think I put don't remember, I don't know.
So what I'd love to do to just kind of pivot briefly, you know, Natalie, do we want to maybe do that exercise we were talking about? Maybe if everyone wants to work with the person sitting next to them, and then do you want to introduce the exercise?
Yes, so just as a fun way, and again, this is not script practice where it doesn't necessarily have to be real estate related. I know we talked a little bit about how just changing your communication style can help you in any department of your life. We just encourage you guys, so partner up with one person next to you and just have one person be the speaker. Just take 3 of these and just say a sentence with them. Just to see how the words feel when you say it. And then you can ask your partner, well, how does it feel when I say it like that? And you can always compare with, okay, what would I normally say if I didn't have that word? But just choose 3, say it to your partner and just practice how it speaks. And remember, you know it's working when you get them to move closer to you. You see that the conversation is easier to be had and that person moves closer to you. If it feels unnatural, it's okay, try another one. But when you practice it and you actually have those words on your mouth, it's a very, very different feeling. out of it, we can just take 5 minutes.
Yeah, this is the best group of people to do it with, cause like
Yes.
it's, there's no right, wrong and different, like just, try it out, test out some of the things up there. So if we can maybe like, we'll do like 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and then maybe Maria, Mina, and then Nita, Lisa, and then I guess we could do.
Clump us together.
Yeah, the Kopecks are one. And then maybe Tim and Pat. So let's take 5 to 7 minutes, yeah.
Every morning,
Right.